The pounding started at 6 minutes, a hollow, authoritative rhythm that shattered the morning quiet. I cinched my robe and opened the door to find a deputy sheriff standing on my porch, holding paperwork that felt like lead in my hands. He told me I was being evicted. I had paid my rent faithfully for 3 years, yet the bold ink on the page claimed I was already a trespasser in the only safe place I had left. The pounding on the door did not sound like a delivery. It was too heavy, too rhythmic, and entirely devoid of hesitation. It was the sound of authority demanding to be let in. I rolled over and looked at the clock on my nightstand. It was 6 in the morning. The room was still gray with the pre-dawn gloom of late October, the kind of light that made the familiar shapes of my dresser and vanity look strange and imposing. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a stark contrast to the silence of the house. I had lived in this small bungalow on Elm Street for 3 years, ever since the divorce papers were signed, and I had to learn how to be Skylar Edwards again. Just Skylar, singular and sufficient. I pulled on my robe, cinching the belt tight as if it could hold me together, and walked barefoot across the hardwood floor. The cold seeped into my soles. When I opened the front door, the air was crisp and smelled of damp leaves. A man in a tan uniform stood on my porch. He was broad-shouldered, with a buzz cut and a face that looked like it had been set in stone long ago. His badge caught the weak morning light. "Ms. Edwards?" he asked. His voice was flat, practiced. "Yes," I said. My voice sounded thin, sleep rough. "I am Deputy Evan Rourke with the Renford County Sheriff's Department. I have legal documents to serve you regarding the property at this address." He held out a thick stack of papers. The top page was yellow, a color that instinctively triggered a warning in my brain. I took them automatically, my fingers brushing against the rough paper. The words at the top were bold and black: writ of possession, eviction order. I stared at the words, but they did not make sense. It was like reading a foreign language where I knew the alphabet, but not the vocabulary. "I think there is a mistake," I said. I felt a strange, detached calm settling over me. It was too absurd to be frightening. "I pay my rent. I paid it on the 1st. I have never been late." The deputy shifted his weight. He did not look aggressive, just tired. He had probably done this 1,000 times. "The order comes from the court. Ms. Edwards. It states that judgment was entered against you for non-compliance and holdover occupancy. You have 72 hours to vacate the premises before a lockout is enforced." 72 hours. The number floated in the air between us. "No," I said, shaking my head. I realized I was still holding the door handle with a white-knuckled grip. "This is an administrative error. I rent through Ashgrove Property Services. I have an auto draft set up. Look, I can show you." I did not wait for his permission. I turned and ran to the kitchen counter where my phone was charging. I unplugged it with fumbling fingers, tapping in my passcode. My banking app opened, the blue wheel spinning for an agonizing second before my transaction history loaded. I walked back to the door, thrusting the screen toward him. "See?" I pointed to the line item from 3 days ago. "Ashgrove Property Services, $2,400, cleared, and last month, and the month before." Deputy Rourke glanced at the screen, then back at my face. He seemed to be looking for something: drugs, hysteria, the erratic movements of someone trying to spin a lie, but I was just standing there in my bathrobe, shivering slightly from the cold, holding out a cell phone as if it were a shield. He softened. "Just a fraction. I am not the judge, ma'am. I just served the paper. If you have proof of payment, you need to take it up with the court or the landlord. But right now, this is a valid order." "Who is the plaintiff?" I asked. If Ashgrove made a mistake, I needed to call them immediately. I looked down at the paperwork in my hand, really looked at it for the first time. The plaintiff line did not say Ashgrove Property Services. It read, "The Halston Ridge Family Trust." I frowned. I had never heard of Halston Ridge. I had signed my lease renewal 4 months ago with Ashgrove. Had the owner changed? Had they sold the building without telling me? My eyes scanned down the page to the signature block at the bottom of the complaint. There were 2 signatures above the title, co-trustees. The handwriting was familiar. It was as familiar as the cursive on my birthday cards, as the checks that used to come in the mail when I was in college. The first signature was a tight, looped script, Marilyn Edwards. The second was sharp, jagged, pressing hard into the paper, Gordon Edwards. My parents. The world tilted. The porch seemed to drop away beneath my feet, leaving me suspended in a vacuum of sudden, violent nausea. I looked up at Deputy Rourke. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Are you all right?" he asked. His hand moved slightly, hovering near his belt, not reaching for a weapon but bracing for a collapse. "My parents," I whispered. "These are my parents." He looked confused. "The landlords?" "Yes." He paused, his eyes narrowing. He looked at the house behind me, the tidy living room, the vase of dried hydrangeas on the entry table, the shoes lined up neatly by the mat. Then he looked back at me, noting the genuine, blood-draining shock on my face. This was not the performance of a squatter playing for time. This was someone having the floor ripped out from under them. "You need to contact them," he said, his voice dropping the official cadence. "If this is a family matter, maybe they can call the sheriff's office and pull the order. But until they do, the clock is ticking. You have 3 days." I nodded dumbly. He touched the brim of his hat and walked back to his cruiser. I watched him go, the heavy paperwork trembling in my hands. I closed the door and locked it, then leaned my back against the wood, sliding down until I hit the floor. I sat there in the hallway, clutching the eviction notice, trying to make my brain process the impossible. My parents had evicted me. They hadn't just asked me to leave. They hadn't sent a letter. They had gone to court, filed a lawsuit under a trust name I didn't know existed, and sent a deputy to throw me out. The memories hit me like a physical blow. Flashbacks of the last 6 months. Sunday dinner. 2 weeks ago. The pot roast was dry. My mother, Marilyn, had been watching me across the table with that look, the one that mixed pity with disappointment. "You look tired." "Skylar," she had said, pouring gravy with a steady hand. "Are you sure you are managing? The rent on that place is so high for one person." "I am fine, Mom," I had replied. "I just got a promotion at the clinic. I can handle it." "Gordon," my father, had grunted from the head of the table. "Money goes out faster than it comes in. You should be saving. We have the guest suite. It is just sitting there." It was a refrain I heard constantly since the divorce. When Mark left, my parents had swooped in. At first, it felt like love. They brought casseroles. They offered to help with the name change paperwork. But then the suggestions started. "Why don't you move back home, just for a year, just until you get your feet under you? You are fragile right now. We don't want you alone." I had fought them. I needed my own space. I needed to prove that a failed marriage didn't mean a failed life. I had held on to this rental house like a life raft, and they had just punctured it. I scrambled up from the floor and grabbed my phone again. My fingers shook so hard, I kept hitting the wrong digits. I dialed my mother first. It rang, and rang, and rang. Then, her voicemail. "You have reached Marilyn. Leave a message." "Mom," I said, my voice cracking. "A deputy just showed up at my door. With an eviction notice. It has your signature on it. Pick up the phone. Please, pick up." I hung up and dialed my father. It went straight to voicemail. I stood in the center of my kitchen, the silence of the house suddenly feeling oppressive. They weren't answering. They knew. They knew exactly what time the deputy was coming. I called Ash Grove Property Services. It was not even 7 o'clock yet, but they had an answering service. I waited until the office opened at 8, pacing the length of my living room, wearing a path in the rug. When the clock finally turned over to 8 o'clock, I dialed. "Ash Grove Property Services. How can I help you?" The receptionist's voice was bright and chirpy. "This is Skylar Edwards. I live at 412 Elm. I just received an eviction notice, but I have paid my rent. I need to speak to Raina Holt." There was a pause, the sound of typing. "I see the file here. Ms. Edwards, I'm afraid I cannot put you through to Ms. Holt, since this is an active enforcement matter. All communication has to go through the legal team." What legal team I demanded. My voice rising. I have a lease with you. I paid you 3 days ago. That payment has been held in escrow pending the judgment. The receptionist said smoothly. As for the notice, our records show you were sent 3 certified letters regarding lease termination and holdover status over the last 2 months. You failed to respond. That is a lie. I said, I never got any letters. The tracking numbers are in the file. She said, I am sorry. Ms. Edwards, you will need to vacate. She hung up. I stood there, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. 3 letters. Certified. I ran to the front door and threw it open, marching out to the mailbox at the end of the driveway. I yanked the metal lid down. It was empty, but as I stood there, staring into the dark metal tunnel, a cold realization washed over me. My mail had been weird lately. I hadn't received my credit card statement last month. I had to go online to check the balance. The utility bill had been late. I had assumed the postal service was just slow. Skylar, I jumped. Tessa Linford, my neighbor from across the street, was standing by her hedge, holding a garden hose. She looked concerned. Is everything okay? I saw the police car earlier. I swallowed hard, trying to compose my face. I didn't want the neighborhood to know. I didn't want to be the divorcee who got kicked out. Yes, just a misunderstanding. Tessa, can I ask you something? Have you seen anyone near my mailbox lately? Tessa frowned, tapping her chin with a gloved hand. Well, yes, I saw your dad last week, my dad. Yeah, Gordon. He drove up in that big truck of his. It was early, maybe 7 in the morning. You hadn't left for work yet. He used a key, opened the box, and took a stack of mail. I figured you asked him to pick it up for you. My stomach dropped so hard I felt dizzy. I had never given him a key, but I had left a spare house key and a mailbox key at their house 2 years ago. When I went on vacation with Mark, I had forgotten to ask for it back. He had been stealing my mail. He had been intercepting the notices. They didn't just want me out. They wanted me blindsided. I walked back into the house, but I didn't feel safe anymore. The walls felt thin. The windows felt like eyes. If they had a key to the mailbox, did they have a key to the door? Of course they did. Panic began to rise in my throat, hot and sour. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the vase of hydrangeas against the wall. Stop. I told myself, stop it. That is what they want. They want you to break. They want you to call them crying, begging to come home so they can pick up the pieces. I took a deep breath, then another. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. When I looked in the mirror, I saw dark circles under my eyes, but I also saw the set of my jaw. It was the same jaw as my father's. I walked back to the living room and picked up my phone. I opened the camera app and switched to video. I am recording this on October 27th at 8:15 in the morning. I said to the empty room. My voice was steady. I walked through the house. I filmed the pristine condition of the floors. I filmed the walls, showing no damage. I filmed the thermostat. Then I walked to the kitchen table where I had spread out the eviction papers and my bank statements. I zoomed in on the date of the eviction order. I zoomed in on my banking app showing the rent payments. I have paid rent every month. I narrated. I received no notice. My mailbox was accessed without my permission by a third party. This property is in perfect condition. I am not unstable. I am not destitute. I am being targeted. I stopped the recording. I saved it to the cloud, then emailed it to my work address. I wasn't going to post it. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of a public meltdown. This was insurance. If they tried to tell people I destroyed the place, or that I was living in filth, I had proof. I showered quickly, dressing in my sharpest blazer and slacks. I put on makeup, hiding the fatigue. I needed to look like Skylar Edwards, the clinical consultant, not Skylar the daughter. I grabbed my purse and the eviction papers and drove to the county courthouse. The Renford County Civil Clerk's office was located in the basement of the limestone courthouse building. It smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. The fluorescent lights hummed with a low, headache-inducing buzz. I waited in line for 20 minutes, clutching my number ticket. When I finally reached the glass window, The clerk looked at me with bored eyes. "I need to see the file for this case," I said, sliding the eviction order under the glass. She typed the case number into her computer. Edwards versus Edwards. She read, "Judgment by default." "Yes," I said. "I want to know why it was a default. I never received a summons." She sighed and got up. Walking to the rows of filing cabinets behind her, she returned a minute later with a manila folder. She placed it on the counter but kept her hand on it. "You can look at it here. You cannot take it with you. Copies are 50 cents a page." I opened the folder. There were the filings. The complaint alleging that I was a tenant at Sufferance and that the trust required the property for family use, and there, the second document in the stack, was the proof of service. It claimed that a process server had come to my home on October 10th at 5:30 in the afternoon and personally handed me the summons. I looked at the signature on the line marked recipient. It was a scrawl, a messy, looping scribble that looked vaguely like Skylar. But it wasn't my signature. I didn't sign like that. And on October 10th at 5:30, I was still at the Northbridge Clinic. We had a late staff meeting that day. I had witnesses. I had a time card. I stared at the forgery. My hands started to shake, the paper rattling against the counter. "This isn't my signature," I whispered. The clerk shrugged. "You can file a motion to set aside the judgment if you want, but the judge already signed the order. You would need a lawyer." I looked through the rest of the file. My eyes caught a notice of appearance filed by the plaintiff's attorney. I expected to see a stranger's name. Instead, I saw Kellen Price. The air left my lungs. Kellen Price. He was a partner at the biggest firm in town. He was also my father's golf partner. He had been to our house for Christmas parties. He had given me a savings bond when I graduated high school. This wasn't just my parents being overprotective and misguided. They hadn't just gone down to the courthouse and filled out a form. They had hired a high-powered attorney. They had created a trust. They had engineered a legal pathway to force me out of my home. This took time. This took planning. This took money. While I was going to work, buying groceries, and thinking we were rebuilding our relationship. They were building a trap. I closed the file. The anger that rose up in me then was different from the shock I had felt earlier. It was cold. It was hard. It settled in the pit of my stomach like a stone. I looked at the clerk. "I need copies." I said, "I need copies of everything." As I waited for the pages to print, I looked at the bulletin board on the wall. It listed the daily docket, Halston Ridge Family Trust versus S. Edwards. It looked so official, so legal, but I knew the truth now. This wasn't about the law. This was about control. They wanted me back under their roof, back under their thumb, and they were willing to commit fraud to do it. I took the stack of warm copies from the clerk. I walked out of the courthouse and into the blinding daylight. I wasn't going to move back home. I wasn't going to let them win. I walked to my car, tossed the file onto the passenger seat, and gripped the steering wheel. They wanted a helpless daughter. They were about to find out exactly who they had raised. The drive to the legal aid office was a blur of autumn leaves and gray asphalt. I knew I couldn't afford a private attorney, not if I was about to lose my home and possibly my deposit. My savings were modest. The divorce had seen to that. I parked the car and sat for a moment, breathing in the smell of the old upholstery. I thought about Deputy Rourke's face, the way he had hesitated. If you have proof, I had proof. I had the bank records. I had the neighbor who saw the mail theft. I had the forgery. But proof meant nothing if I didn't know how to use it. I got out of the car and walked toward the brick building with the faded sign Harbor Line Legal Aid. I was done being the victim. I was done being the dutiful daughter. I pushed the door open. A bell jingled above my head, a sharp, clear sound that marked the end of my old life and the beginning of the war. I stepped inside. One way or another, the truth was coming out, and I was going to be the one to tell it. The waiting room of Harbor Line Legal Aid smelled like wet wool, stale coffee, and desperation. It was a small, cramped space on the second floor of a building that had seen better decades, filled with mismatched chairs and people holding folders that contained the collapsing fragments of their lives. I sat near the door, clutching my own file. my knuckles white against the yellow manila. When my name was finally called, it was by a woman who looked like she was running on caffeine and sheer force of will. "Skylar Edwards," she called out, not looking up from a clipboard. I stood up. "Here, come back," she said, turning on her heel. Nadia Mercer's office was a testament to organized chaos. Stacks of case files formed precarious towers on her desk, and the floor was lined with boxes labeled by year. She swept a pile of papers off a guest chair and gestured for me to sit. "Talk fast," she said, sitting down and opening a laptop. "I have an intake hearing in 40 minutes. What is the emergency?" I slid the eviction notice across the desk, along with the printouts I had made at the clerk's office. "I was served this morning at 6 o'clock. I said, "They claim I am a holdover tenant. They claim I haven't paid rent, but I have receipts for every month, including October. And I never received a single notice before the sheriff showed up." Nadia adjusted her glasses and pulled the paperwork toward her. Her eyes scanned the pages with the speed of someone who read legal tragedy for a living. She frowned almost immediately. "Halston Ridge Family Trust." She read aloud. She looked at me. "Who is this, usually? Eviction cases are LLCs or property management firms. Family trusts usually mean, well, family. They are my parents." I said. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. Nadia stopped typing. She looked up, her expression shifting from hurried efficiency to sharp curiosity. "Your parents are evicting you?" "Yes. I didn't know the house was in a trust." "I rent through Ashgrove Property Services." Nadia flipped to the proof of service page. She tapped the signature line with a pen. "Is this you?" "No." I said, "That is not my signature." "And on the date listed, I was at work." Nadia leaned back in her chair, the leather creaking. She took a deep breath and let it out slowly. "Okay," she said. "Here is what I see. I see a landlord entity that is distinct from the management company, which is unusual for a standard rental unless there is a specific asset protection strategy in play. I see a timeline that is incredibly tight. The minimum legal days between the complaint and the default judgment were adhered to down to the hour. And I see a proof of service that you claim is forged." She looked me in the eye. "Certified mail." She said, "Did you get any no?" I said, "The management company claims they sent 3 letters." Nadia nodded grimly. "That is the oldest trick in the book. If I want to get you out fast, and I don't want you to fight back, I send the letters to an address where I know you won't get them, or I have someone intercept them, or I just generate a tracking number but never actually mail the envelope. The court clerk just looks for the receipt that says delivered or attempted. They don't check who signed for it." She started typing furiously. "This smells wrong. Skylar, it is too clean. Usually. These family disputes are messy shouting matches on the lawn. Police calls for domestic disturbance. This is a surgical strike. Someone knew exactly how to navigate the blind spots of the civil court system to get a default judgment before you even knew you were a defendant." She hit a final key with a definitive clack. "I am filing an emergency motion to stay the eviction," she said. "We are going to argue improper service and potential fraud upon the court. It is a long shot to get it fully overturned today, but I can get a temporary pause. That will buy us a week, maybe 10 days, until a hearing can be set. 10 days. I repeated. It didn't sound like enough. It is better than being on the street in 72 hours. Nadia said, "But listen to me. If your parents are behind this, and they have gone to these lengths, they are not going to stop just because a judge pauses the clock. They have an attorney, Kellen Price." I said. Nadia whistled low. "That is not a landlord-tenant lawyer. That is corporate litigation. He charges more per hour than I make in a week. Your parents are bringing a tank to a knife fight." She printed out a document and slid it toward me. "Sign this. It authorizes me to represent you. Then go home. Do not pack. Do not leave the premises for more than an hour at a time if you can avoid it. Possession is 9/10 of the law, and right now, you are still inside. We keep it that way." I drove home with a stomach full of acid. The temporary hope Nadia had given me was fragile, battered by the reality of the names involved. Kellen Price, the Halston Ridge Trust. These were heavy, institutional things, and I was just one woman with a checking account and a job I couldn't afford to lose. When I pulled into my driveway, I saw a familiar cruiser parked 2 houses down. It was Deputy Rourke. He was sitting in the driver's seat, writing on a clipboard. I parked and walked over to him. He saw me coming and rolled down the window. "Ms. Edwards," he said. He didn't smile, but his eyes weren't hard. "Deputy," I said, "I just came from legal aid. My attorney is filing a stay." He nodded slowly. "Good. Can I ask you something?" I asked, leaning slightly toward the window. "You seemed hesitant this morning. When you gave me the papers..." Evan Rourke sighed. He placed his pen on the dashboard. "I serve a lot of these, Ms. Edwards. Usually, when I get an order for an immediate lockout due to holdover and noncompliance, I walk into a disaster zone. Broken windows, trash in the yard, people screaming." He looked past me at my house. The lawn was freshly mowed. The porch light was intact. The car in the driveway was clean. "You were wearing a robe, but your house was spotless," he said. "You had bank records ready in 30 seconds. You weren't high. You weren't drunk. You were just shocked." He looked back at me. "The file said you were a volatile occupant who had threatened the property manager. That is why they asked for the expedited service." I felt the blood drain from my face. Volatile. I have never raised my voice at anyone in my life. "That is what I figured," Rourke said. "It didn't add up. The paperwork was too neat. The narrative was too perfect. It felt like someone was checking boxes to bypass the standard waiting periods." He started the engine. "I can't give you legal advice," he said. "But if that stay comes through, make sure you get a copy to the Sheriff's Department dispatch immediately. Otherwise, the night shift might come by to lock you out without knowing the status changed." "I will," I said. "Thank you, Deputy." He nodded and drove off, the tires crunching softly on the asphalt. I walked into my house, the silence greeting me like a physical weight. Volatile occupant. That was the narrative they were spinning. They weren't just evicting me. They were assassinating my character to justify it. I sat on the couch and stared at my phone. I had to try again. I had to hear them say it. I dialed my mother's number. This time, she answered on the second ring. "Skylar." Her voice was soft, trembling slightly. It was the voice she used when she wanted to play the martyr. The voice that usually made me crumble and apologize for things I hadn't done. "Mom," I said. My voice was steady, surprising even me. "Why is there a deputy at my door? Why are you doing this?" "Oh, honey," she sighed. "It sounds so harsh when you say it like that. We aren't doing this to you. We are doing it for you." "For me?" I asked, gripping the phone. "You are throwing me on the street. You forged a trust I have never heard of. You lied to a court. We are protecting the family assets," she said, as if reciting a script. "And we are protecting you. You have been spiraling. Skylar, ever since Mark left, you are isolated. You are spending money you don't have." "I have a job," I said, my voice rising. "I pay my bills. I am 33 years old." "You are not stable," she cut in, her voice sharpening with a sudden, frantic edge. "You are living in that rental, all alone, pretending everything is fine. But we know it isn't. We know you are struggling. Gordon and I decided we couldn't watch you drown anymore. So you decided to hold my head under the water," I asked. "Please, Skylar," she said, dropping back to the soft whisper. "There is a solution. We don't want a scene. We don't want the neighbors talking. You can end this today." "How move home?" she said. "The guest suite is ready. We had the carpet cleaned. You can move back in immediately. No eviction on your record. No embarrassment. And the condition I asked, I knew there was a condition." She paused. "We have drawn up a standard agreement. A temporary residency and financial oversight agreement. It just gives your father power of attorney over your accounts for a year, just to help you get your credit back on track, to help you budget. We would manage the paycheck, give you an allowance for necessities. It is for your own good." The room spun. They wanted to liquidate my life. They wanted to turn me into a child, an invalid, Someone who needed an allowance to buy a cup of coffee. It wasn't about saving me, it was about owning me. No, I said. Skylar, be reasonable. No. Mom, I am not signing that. I am not moving back. There was a scuffling sound on the other end of the line, and then my father's breathing filled the receiver. It was heavy, angry. You are making a mistake, Gordon said. His voice was cold iron. You committed fraud. Dad, I said, you forged my signature on a service document, proving that will cost you more money than you have. He said, you brought this on yourself. Skylar, you think you are independent? You are a mess. Your divorce made this family look foolish. People talk. They ask why the Edwards girl couldn't keep a husband. They ask why she is living in a rental box when her family has property. So this is about your ego. I asked, this is because I embarrass you. You are not fit to represent the Edwards name in this town right now, he shouted. You are erratic. You are ungrateful. We gave you time. Now we are taking control. I am fighting this. Dad, I said, I went to legal aid. We are filing a motion. He laughed. A short bark of a sound. Legal aid. Good luck with that. You are going to lose. Skylar. And when you do, don't come crawling to the front door. You will go to the back door, and you will ask nicely. The line went dead. I lowered the phone, my hand shaking so hard I almost dropped it. You are not fit. Financial oversight, allowance, the cruelty of it was breathtaking. They had constructed an entire reality where I was mentally incompetent, just to justify dragging me back into their cage. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Nadia. Judge granted the temporary stay. Hearing set for next Friday. Do not miss it. I will email you the order, print it, and tape it to your front door. I let out a breath that sounded like a sob. I had a week. I went to my laptop and logged into my bank account again. I needed to understand the money. My father had said I was spending money I didn't have. It was a lie. But lies usually had a grain of twisted truth they were built on. I pulled up the last 12 months of transactions. Rent $2,400. Ashgrove Property Services. I scrolled back. Every month. The same. But then I stopped at July. In July. The amount was $2,472. In August, $2,472. In September, $2,472. I clicked on the transaction details. Ashgrove Property SVC. AC. H transfer. I searched my email archives for Ashgrove. I found the lease renewal I had signed in June. The rent was listed clearly $2,400 per month. I looked closer at the bank transaction. There was a small code next to the amount PROCFEE, a processing fee I had been on auto pay for 3 years. There had never been a processing fee. I looked at the date the fee started, July 1st. That was 2 weeks after I had told my parents I wouldn't be coming to the annual 4th of July party, because I was going on a trip with some friends. I remembered my father's tight expression. You are prioritizing strangers over family, he had said. Someone had altered the billing terms on the back end, a 3% fee. It wasn't enough to cause an overdraft, but it was a change, a unilateral change to the lease terms. If I hadn't authorized it, that meant Ashgrove had changed it. And why would they add a fee suddenly for a tenant with a perfect payment history? Unless my status in their system had changed from standard tenant to something else. I needed air. I needed to see something real. I grabbed my coat and walked across the street. Tessa was in her garden again, raking leaves. When she saw me, she stopped and leaned on the rake. Hey, she said, you look like you have been through a war. I feel like it. I said, Tessa, about what you said earlier. Seeing my dad at the mailbox. She nodded. Yeah, do you still have the footage? You have that Ring camera on your porch, right? Tessa's face grew serious. I do. It overwrites every 30 days. But if it was last week, it should still be there. Come on in. I followed her into her living room, which smelled of cinnamon and dogs. She pulled out her iPad and opened the app. Let us see, she muttered. scrolling back through the timeline. Tuesday, Wednesday. Here, Thursday morning, 6:45 a.m. She pressed play. On the screen. The street was gray and quiet. A black Ford F-150 rolled into the frame. I knew that truck. I knew the dent on the rear bumper from when my father backed into a retaining wall. The truck stopped right in front of my driveway. The driver's door opened. Gordon Edwards stepped out. He was wearing his work jacket, the one with the Edwards Industrial Supply logo on the back. He didn't look around. He walked straight to my mailbox, pulled a key from his pocket, and opened it. He pulled out a stack of white envelopes. He flipped through them quickly. He shoved 3 of them into his jacket pocket and put the rest back in the box. Then he locked it, got back in his truck, and drove away. I stared at the screen, a cold fury rising in my chest. He didn't just take the mail. He sorted it. He curated what I was allowed to see. "Can you send that to me?" I asked, my voice tight. Tessa looked at me, her eyes wide. "Skylar, is he stealing from you?" "He is trying to steal my life." "Tessa, please, send it to me." She tapped the screen. Sent. I walked back across the street, the video burning a hole in my pocket. I had proof of mail theft. That was a federal crime. My father, the man who preached about law and order and the Edwards family reputation, was a petty criminal. But I needed to connect the dots. I needed to know how they got Ashgrove to play along. A property management company wouldn't just risk their license for a favor unless there was something in it for them. I got in my car. I wasn't going to call Raina Holt again. I was going to see her. Ashgrove Property Services was located in a strip mall on the north side of town. The office was sleek, with modern furniture and generic abstract art on the walls. I walked in. The receptionist, the one who had hung up on me, looked up. Her eyes widened. "Ms. Edwards," she said, reaching for the phone. "You cannot be here. We have legal proceedings. I'm here to pay a bill." I said loudly, "I want to inquire about the $72 processing fee that was added to my account in July without my authorization." The door to the back office opened. Raina Holt stepped out. She was a woman in her 40s, wearing a suit that was too tight and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Skylar," she said, "please, come into my office. Let us not make a scene in the lobby." I followed her back. Her office was cluttered, smelling of heavy perfume. She sat behind her desk and folded her hands, but I saw her thumbs twitching. "We received the stay order from the court 10 minutes ago," she said stiffly. "So, obviously, the lockout is canceled for now." "Why did you lie about the service I asked?" "I didn't sit down. I didn't lie," Raina said, looking at a spot on the wall over my shoulder. "Our process server submitted an affidavit. We rely on our vendors. My parents are the trustees." I said. Raina blinked. "Yes, the Halston Ridge Family Trust. You knew." I said, "You knew they were my parents." Raina shifted in her chair. "Well, obviously, there is a connection. Your trustees were very clear about your situation. They explained that this was a protective intervention, that you were non-responsive to family attempts to help." "Help," I laughed. A harsh sound. "They are evicting me. They directed us to enforce the lease strictly," Raina said, her voice sounding rehearsed. "They informed us that the property was being transferred to the trust and that the trust required vacancy for renovation and family use. We just follow the owner's instructions." "Skylar, but you listed me as volatile," I said. "You told the deputy I threatened you." "When did I threaten you?" "Raina, we have spoken twice in 3 years, and both times were about fixing the air conditioner." Raina's face flushed. "The trustees provided a risk assessment. They indicated that given your recent mental health struggles, a confrontation could be dangerous. We have a duty to protect our staff." She had admitted it. She hadn't witnessed anything. She had taken my parents' word, their lies, and put them into a legal document. I looked around the office, disgusted. My eyes landed on the wall behind her. There was a row of framed certificates, Chamber of Commerce, Best of Renford 2024, and a larger, more ornate plaque, Platinum Community Partner, It listed the corporate sponsors who supported Ashgrove's charitable initiatives. The first name on the list was Pinnacle Harbor Lending. The second name was Halston Ridge Development Group. I stared at the name, Halston Ridge. That wasn't just a family trust name. That was a development group, a business. Is Halston Ridge Development Group the same as the family trust? I asked, pointing at the plaque. Raina's eyes darted to the wall, then back to me. She looked suddenly terrified. I think you should leave. Skylar, before I call the police? I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Call them. I said, ask for Deputy Rourke. I think he would love to hear about how you filed a false report based on a risk assessment from a third party. I turned and walked out. My hands were shaking again, but not from fear, from adrenaline. Halston Ridge wasn't just a shell for the house, it was a sponsor. It was a business entity that had a financial relationship with Ashgrove. My parents weren't just protecting assets, they were moving money. They were playing a game that involved development groups and lenders, and I was just the obstacle in the way of the deal. I got back in my car and locked the doors. I pulled up the family agreement mental image again. Financial oversight. They didn't just want to control me. They needed to control the narrative. If I was the crazy daughter, no one would believe me when I started asking why the family trust was listed as a development partner on a property management wall. I started the engine. Nadia was right. They had brought a tank, but they had forgotten one thing. You can't run a tank quietly, and I was starting to hear the gears turning. The following Monday morning, Nadia Mercer's office looked like the aftermath of a paper explosion. We had filed expedited subpoenas, leveraging the emergency stay to demand immediate disclosure of the eviction's foundational documents. Nadia was not playing games. She had requested everything: the process server's logbook, the certified mail receipts, and the trust formation documents for the Halston Ridge Family Trust. When I arrived at 9 o'clock, Nadia was already pacing behind her desk, holding a document that smelled of toner. Sit down, she said, her voice tight. We got the deed history from the county recorder. I sat, clutching my coffee cup like a lifeline. What does it say? Nadia slapped the paper onto the desk. Your parents transferred the title of the property from their personal names to the Halston Ridge Family Trust on May 15th. She said, May 15th? I did the math in my head. That was 5 months ago. It was right around the time my mother had started bringing over casseroles 3 times a week, asking probing questions about my work schedule and my savings. It looks legal on the surface, Nadia continued, tracing the stamp with her finger. It is a quit-claim deed. Standard estate planning move. People put assets into trust to avoid probate all the time. But here's the thing. Skylar, when a property changes hands, even to a trust, the lease travels with the land. Your tenancy rights don't just vanish because the owner changed their name on a piece of paper. So why does it matter? I asked. Because of the timing. Nadia said. She pulled another document from the stack. This is the trust formation document. The trust was created on May 1st. The house was moved in 2 weeks later. And look at the trust's stated purpose. She pointed to a paragraph in dense legalese. To hold and manage income-producing real property for the benefit of the beneficiaries. Nadia looked at me over the rim of her glasses. Income-producing, she repeated. That is the key. If this was just about keeping the house in the family, they could have just left it alone. But by explicitly labeling it as an income vehicle and then moving to evict you for non-performance 5 months later, they are trying to clean up the asset. Clean it up, I asked. Get rid of the low-paying or problematic tenant and replace you with someone paying market rate, or just show the property is vacant and ready for leverage. Nadia said, but they couldn't just kick you out because you have a lease. So they had to manufacture a breach. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the office air conditioning. They didn't just want me home. I realized aloud, they needed the house empty. Nadia nodded. It is a 2-pronged attack. They get control of you, and they get control of the asset, and they use the court system to do it. I leaned back, my mind racing. May. What happened in May? I closed my eyes, trying to picture it. Family dinner, the roast chicken, my father pouring wine, flashback. It was a Sunday. The air was warm. We were sitting on the patio. My father had been unusually jovial, asking about my car, asking if I needed new tires. Then, after dessert, he had slid a folder across the glass table. Just some routine updates. Sky, he had said casually. The insurance on the house needs a signature to confirm occupancy, and we are updating the beneficiary forms for the old savings account. Just initial here and here. He had pointed to the bottom of a page that was mostly covered by another page. I had reached for a pen, but then I hesitated. I had been reading a lot of contracts at work. Can I read it first? I had asked. My father's smile had stiffened. It is just standard boilerplate. Skylar, don't be difficult. The agent is waiting for it. I will take it home and read it. I had insisted. He had snatched the folder back. Fine, forget it. I will handle it myself. I just wanted to save you the hassle. End flashback. I opened my eyes and looked at Nadia. They tried to get me to sign something in May. I said, I refused. But if they needed a signature for the trust transfer or the lease assignment, they might have improvised. Nadia finished. If they couldn't get your signature then, maybe they lifted it from somewhere else. She handed me the copy of the proof of service again. Look at this signature, she said. You said it wasn't yours, but look closely. I stared at the scrawl. It was loopy, a bit shaky. Now look at this, Nadia said. She pulled a photocopy of an old birthday card I had given my mother 3 years ago, which she had subpoenaed from my parents' evidence file. They had submitted it to show our close family bond. The signature on the card, Love, Skylar. The signature on the eviction notice, Skylar. The loop on the S was identical. The way the Y trailed off was identical. It wasn't a forgery done by a stranger. It was a trace. Someone had put the eviction notice over a light box, placed my old card underneath, and traced my name. My mother kept every card I ever gave her. She kept them in a shoebox in her closet. I felt sick, physically sick. My mother had used a birthday card, a symbol of my love for her, to render me homeless. We need to prove the financial motive, Nadia said, breaking into my spiraling thoughts. If we can show the judge that this eviction is tied to a financial transaction for the trust, it destroys their concerned parents' narrative. It proves malice. I stood up. I know who to talk to. Darren Vale lived in a small, clapboard house on the edge of town, the kind of place where the grass was overgrown and a rusting boat sat in the driveway. He had been the bookkeeper for Edwards Industrial Supply for 15 years before he retired last spring. I hadn't seen him in years, but I remembered him as a nervous man, always wiping sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. I parked my car and walked up the cracked walkway. I knocked. It took a minute, but the door opened. Darren stood there in a stained t-shirt and sweatpants. He looked older, grayer. Skylar, he asked, squinting against the sunlight. Skylar Edwards. Hi, Darren, I said. I am sorry to just show up, but I need to talk to you about my father. Darren's face closed up. He started to close the door. I am retired. Skylar, I don't talk about the business. Darren, please, I said, putting a hand on the doorframe. They are evicting me. My own parents. They are throwing me out of my house. He paused. Looking at my face, he saw the desperation there. I heard, he muttered, town is small. I need to know why. Darren, I know about the trust. I know about Halston Ridge, but I don't know why they are doing this now. He hesitated, then sighed. A long, rattling sound. Come in. But I ain't making tea. I followed him into a living room stacked with newspapers. He cleared a spot on the sofa for me. Your dad, he said, sitting in a recliner. He is a proud man. Too proud. Is the company in trouble? I asked. Darren laughed, a dry hacking sound. Trouble, Skylar. The supply chain issues last year killed them. They lost the municipal contract to a firm from out of state. Gordon has been floating payroll on credit cards for 6 months. I stared at him. My father always acted like the king of the county. He bought new trucks. He went on vacations. He is broke, I asked. Not broke, Darren corrected. Illiquid. He has assets. The warehouse. The equipment. Your rental house. But he has no cash. And the bank was calling in a note. A big one. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. He was terrified of an audit. Skylar, if the bank looked too closely at the books, they would see he was moving money between accounts to make it look like revenue. He needed to refinance. He needed a new loan to pay off the old one before the auditors came. And the house, I asked? The lender, he found some private equity group, Pinnacle Harbor or something. They wanted collateral. Darren said. They wanted clean, income-producing assets, real estate, but they didn't want messy family deals. They wanted a trust structure, and they wanted to see market-rate returns. I felt the pieces clicking together. He put the house in the trust to use it as collateral. I said. Darren nodded, and he needed to show the lender that the trust was enforcing compliance. If he has a tenant paying below market, which you were. Slightly, or if the lender thinks it is just a daddy-daughter deal, they value the asset lower. But if he evicts a non-paying tenant and claims he is prepping it for a new, higher-paying lease, that looks like good management. That raises the valuation. So I am just a line item. I whispered. You are a risk factor, Darren said brutally. He is trying to save the company. Skylar. In his head, he probably thinks if he saves the company, he can take care of you later. He doesn't see it as hurting you. He sees it as moving pieces on a board. He thinks I will just move home, I said. He solves his housing problem and his cash flow problem at the same time. Darren shrugged. Gordon always did think he could control the weather. I stood up. Thank you. Darren, will you? If it comes to it, will you testify to this? Darren looked at his hands. I don't want trouble. Skylar, Gordon can be mean. He forged my signature. Darren, he is ruining my reputation. Darren looked up. His eyes were sad. If you subpoena me, I won't lie. That is the best I can do. I left Darren's house with a new kind of energy. It wasn't just sadness anymore. It was clarity. This wasn't a family tragedy. It was a business transaction. My parents were leveraging my life to fix their mistakes. I drove straight to the sheriff's department. I needed to nail down the lie about the service. I walked up to the front desk. The plexiglass barrier was thick. I need to speak with Deputy Rourke. I said, he is on patrol. The sergeant at the desk said. I waited. I sat on a hard plastic bench for 2 hours. I watched people come in to pay tickets, to report accidents. Finally, the double doors opened, and Evan Rourke walked in, helmet under his arm. He saw me and stopped. Ms. Edwards, he said, you are persistent. I have a tip, I said, standing up, and I have a question. He waved me over to a quieter corner of the lobby. What is it? You told me to check the timestamp. I said, on the body cam. He nodded imperceptibly. I can't get the footage yet. I said, but I can get the logs. If the proof of service says the deputy was at my house on October 10th at 5:30. Where was he actually? Rourke looked around. The lobby was busy. He lowered his voice. I looked it up. He said softly, I couldn't help myself. Curiosity. And the deputy listed on your proof of service is Miller. On October 10th at 5:30 in the afternoon. Miller was booking a DUI suspect at the county jail. We have him on the intake video. He signed the intake forms at 5:25 and 5:40. My heart leaped. He couldn't have been at my house. I said, impossible, Rourke said, unless he can teleport. So the affidavit is a lie. It is a false instrument, Rourke said. That is a felony. Ms. Edwards, if you can prove that in court, the judge won't just dismiss the eviction. He will refer it to the district attorney. Can I get a copy of the log? I asked. You have to file a Freedom of Information request, Rourke said, or have your lawyer subpoena it. It will take a few days, but I can write a departmental affidavit stating that I reviewed the shift assignments and intake logs. It is factual. It is just reporting what is in our system. You would do that? I asked. Rourke looked at me. He had kind eyes, but they were serious now. I took an oath. Ms. Edwards, we don't like it when people use our badges to lie. I will write it up. Have your attorney contact me. Thank you. I said, I mean it. He adjusted his belt. Just keep your head down. If they are willing to fake a service, they are desperate. Desperate people do stupid things. The final piece of the puzzle was the mail. I needed to prove they had interfered with my communications. I met Tessa and her friend, Mara Densley, at a coffee shop on the south side. Mara was a mail carrier, a woman with sun-weathered skin and a uniform that looked comfortable and worn. "Tessa says you have been having trouble," Mara said, blowing on her latte. "Someone stole my mail," I said, "and I think they redirected it." Mara nodded. "You live on Elm, right? 412. Yes, I remember that house." Mara said, "I have the route. About 2 months ago. We got a hold mail request." "Who filed it?" I asked. "It came in online." Mara said, "You just need the address and a verification code they send to your phone or email." But here's the weird part. It was a vacation hold for 10 days. But then, 3 days in, it was canceled. And then a week later, another one. They were toggling it. I realized, turning it on when they knew notices were coming, then turning it off. And there was a forwarding order too. Mara added, "Just for a week, forwarding to a P.O. box in Boxwood." Boxwood. That was the town where my father's warehouse was. "Do you have record of that?" I asked. "It is in the system," Mara said. "If you get a court order, the postmaster has to release the history. It will show the IP address of the request too." "Nadia can get that," I said. Mara leaned in. "You know, honey, interfering with the mail is a federal offense. We take that seriously. If you report this to the Postal Inspection Service, they will open a case. I am going to," I said, "but first, I have to survive this hearing." I drove home as the sun was setting. The sky was a bruised purple. I felt exhausted, but also strange. I felt sane. For weeks, I had been feeling like I was losing my grip, missing bills, weird silences from my parents, the feeling of being watched. I had started to doubt my own competence. Maybe I am losing it, I had thought. Maybe the divorce did break me, but I wasn't broken. I was being gaslit. It was a slow, deliberate erosion of my reality. Every missing letter, every fake expression of concern, every "you look tired" comment was a brick in the wall they were building around me. They wanted me to believe I was incompetent, so that when they took over, I would be grateful. I pulled into my driveway, and there they were. My father's truck and my mother's SUV were parked in front of my house. The trunks were open. My parents were standing on my porch. They were holding cardboard boxes. I parked and got out, my legs trembling with rage. "What are you doing?" I asked, walking up the driveway. My mother turned. She was wearing a bright, cheerful sweater. She smiled, but it was tight. "Skylar, we came to help you get a head start." A head start on what I asked. Stopping at the bottom of the steps, unpacking. "Dear," she said, "the hearing is on Friday, but we know how overwhelmed you get. We thought we would help you box up the kitchen. It will make the move so much easier." I looked at them. They were performing. I could see Mrs. Higgins next door watching from her window. They wanted the neighborhood to see the loving parents helping their daughter move. "Get off my porch," I said. Gordon stepped forward. He was holding a roll of packing tape. "Don't cause a scene, Skylar," he hissed. "We are trying to be nice. We are trying to make this dignified." "Dignified?" I asked, my voice rising. "You forged my signature. You stole my mail. You lied to the police." "Keep your voice down," he warned. "No," I said. "I will not keep my voice down. You are not helping me. You are evicting me. And you are doing it because you are broke. Dad." He froze. The color drained from his face. "What did you say?" "I know about the refinance," I said. "I know about the audit. I know you need the trust to have clean assets. I know everything." Gordon dropped the tape. It clattered loudly on the wooden planks. "You don't know what you are talking about," he said. But his voice lacked its usual boom. "I do," I said. "And I have a lawyer. And we have the logs. Dad, we know Deputy Miller wasn't here." Marilyn let out a small, strangled sound. She dropped the box she was holding. It hit the ground, and I heard the sound of glass breaking inside. "Oh, God," she whispered. "Leave," I said. "Get off my property." "This is trust property," Gordon shouted, stepping toward me. He looked dangerous then, cornered and desperate. "I have a lease," I shouted back. "And until a judge says otherwise, this is my home. Now get out before I call Deputy Rourke. He would love a reason to come back here." Gordon stared at me. He looked at my face, really looked at me. He didn't see the scared little girl he was used to. He saw a woman who knew his secrets. He grabbed Marilyn's arm. "Get in the car," he muttered. "But Gordon, the boxes." Marilyn stammered. "Leave them," he snapped. They marched down the steps. My mother was crying, loud, heaving sobs that carried in the evening air. My father looked straight ahead, his jaw working furiously. They got into their cars, engines roared, tires squealed, they drove away. I stood on the driveway, watching their taillights disappear. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. My hands were shaking so hard I had to clasp them together. I looked down at the box my mother had dropped. I bent down and opened the flaps. Inside were my wine glasses, the ones Mark and I had bought on our honeymoon. Half of them were shattered. I picked up a broken stem, the jagged glass glinting in the streetlight. It was a perfect metaphor. They had come to help, and they had broken the only things that were mine. I stood up and kicked the box off the porch. It tumbled into the bushes. I went inside and locked the door. I engaged the deadbolt. I wedged a chair under the handle. I went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. I drank it in one long gulp. I wasn't moving. I wasn't packing. I was staying. And on Friday, I was going to burn their lies to the ground. The heavy oak doors of courtroom 4B swung open with a groan that sounded like a warning. I walked in behind Nadia, keeping my eyes fixed on the back of her blazer. I did not want to look at the gallery. I did not want to see the faces of the people who were supposed to love me most in the world. But peripheral vision is a curse. As we walked to the defendant's table, I saw them. My parents were sitting in the front row behind the plaintiff's table. They were dressed for a funeral, or perhaps a very somber church service. My father wore a charcoal suit that was slightly too large for him now, emphasizing a frailty I knew was performative. My mother wore a pale blue cardigan and a skirt that fell below her knees, her hands clutching a tissue as if she had been weeping for hours. They looked small. They looked aggrieved. They looked like two loving parents who had been forced into a heartbreaking decision by a wayward child. It was a masterpiece of visual storytelling. If I hadn't known they had forged a signature and stolen my mail, I might have felt sorry for them myself. Kellen Price stood at the plaintiff's table. He was taller than I expected, with silver hair and a suit that cost more than my car. He didn't look at me. He looked at the judge, arranging his papers with the confident ease of a man who played golf with the people who decided these cases. "All rise," the bailiff called out. Judge Anthony Vance swept in. He was a man with a face like crumpled parchment and eyes that looked bored by the very concept of human conflict. He sat down, adjusted his glasses, and looked at the docket. Halston Ridge Family Trust versus Edwards. He read, "Eviction proceeding. We are here on an emergency motion to stay the writ of possession." Kellen Price stood up. His voice was rich, deep, and dripping with reluctant sorrow. "Your Honor," he began, "this is a painful matter. My clients, the trustees, have tried every avenue to avoid this day. They are the defendant's parents. They established this trust to secure the family's future, but they have a fiduciary duty to manage the assets responsibly." He gestured vaguely toward me, not making eye contact. "Ms. Edwards has unfortunately become unmanageable. She is chronically late with rent. She is unresponsive to communication. She has allowed the property to fall into a state of neglect that threatens the asset's value. The trust had no choice but to terminate her tenancy." Judge Vance looked at Nadia. Counsel Nadia stood up. She didn't use the flowery language Price did. She was sharp, clipped, and precise. "Your Honor, the defendant denies all allegations of non-payment and neglect. We have bank records showing rent was paid in full and on time for 36 consecutive months. The plaintiff's claim of chronic lateness is manufactured. Furthermore, the defendant was never served with a notice to vacate, nor was she served with the summons for this case. The default judgment was obtained through fraud. Fraud is a strong word. Ms. Mercer, the judge said, peering over his glasses. We do not use it lightly, Nadia said. Price sighed, a sound that suggested he was dealing with a hysterical child. Your Honor, if I may, we have a payment ledger here from Ashgrove Property Services, the professional management company retained by the trust. He walked up to the bench and handed a document to the clerk, who passed it to the judge. He also handed a copy to Nadia. I looked at the ledger. It was a spreadsheet printed on Ashgrove letterhead. It listed my payments for the last 6 months. Beside each entry, in red ink, was a column labeled Outstanding Balance. According to this sheet, I owed $72 in July, then $144 in August, then $216 in September. Late fees, Price explained smoothly. The lease stipulates a late fee if payment is not received by the 1st. The tenant consistently initiates transfer on the 3rd or 4th. Over time, these unpaid fees accumulated, triggering a default under the lease terms. I felt the blood rise in my cheeks. I pay on the 1st. I whispered to Nadia. Every single time. Nadia squeezed my arm under the table. Quiet, she murmured. Your Honor, Nadia said, her voice raising slightly. My client's bank statements show the funds leaving her account on the 1st of every month. If Ashgrove Property Services is processing them 3 days later, that is an administrative delay, not a tenant default, and regardless of $70 in disputed fees. The eviction order claims holdover occupancy, implying the lease was terminated. My client never received a termination notice. We sent 3 certified letters. Price said, the return receipts are in the file. Nadia pulled a sheet of paper from her stack. We have addressed those receipts in our motion, Your Honor, but let us look at the service of the lawsuit itself. The proof of service filed by the plaintiff claims that Deputy Miller personally served Miss Edwards at her home on October 10th at 5:30 in the afternoon. She paused for effect. We have obtained a sworn affidavit from the Renford County Sheriff's Department duty commander. On October 10th at 5:30, Deputy Miller was at the county jail, processing an arrest. He is on video at the intake desk. He could not possibly have been at the defendant's home. The courtroom went silent. The scratch of the court reporter's machine seemed incredibly loud. Judge Vance stopped reading the ledger. He looked up, his eyes suddenly sharp. Let me see that, he said. Nadia walked up and handed him the affidavit Deputy Rourke had secured for us. The judge read it. He read it twice. Then he looked at Kellen Price. Mr. Price, can you explain how your process server claims to be in 2 places at once? Price didn't flinch, but I saw his jaw tighten. Your Honor, I rely on the affidavits provided by the service vendors. If there is a clerical error regarding the time or the specific officer, we can certainly amend the return. A clerical error, the judge asked, his voice dropping an octave. This document swears personal service occurred. It is the basis for the default judgment you asked me to sign. If the deputy wasn't there, then the service didn't happen. And if the service didn't happen, this entire eviction is void. The defendant is here now. Price countered quickly. She has notice now. We are arguing semantics while the property is being held hostage. We are arguing due process. The judge snapped. He looked back at the ledger. And this accounting, he said, tapping the Ashgrove document. You show late fees. The defendant has bank records showing on-time initiation. Did the trust ever notify the tenant of these accruing fees? We sent notices, Price said. As I stated, the tenant is unresponsive. Nadia stood up again. Your Honor, we have evidence that the defendant's mail was tampered with. We have video footage of one of the trustees, Mr. Gordon Edwards, accessing the defendant's mailbox with a key and removing items. She didn't play the video. She just held up the thumb drive. The judge looked at my parents. Gordon stared straight ahead, stone-faced. Marilyn looked down at her lap, twisting her tissue into a tight rope. This is a family matter, Price said. his voice losing some of its gloss. "The trustees have been trying to assist their daughter with her organization. By stealing her mail," Nadia asked. "Enough," Judge Vance said. He slammed his hand down on the bench. "I am not ruling on the possession today. There are too many inconsistencies. The timeline of the trust transfer, the service anomalies, the conflicting ledgers. It smells bad. Mr. Price," he pointed a finger at the plaintiff's table. "I am ordering a continuance for 10 days. In that time, I want original documents. I want the original certified mail receipts, not copies. I want the original process server's logbook, and I want a full audit trail of the tenant's account from Ashgrove, showing exactly when those fees were applied and by whom." He leaned forward. "And let me be clear, if I find that a sworn affidavit of service was falsified, or that this court was used to execute a fraud, I will sanction the plaintiff, and I will refer the matter to the district attorney. Do I make myself clear, Crystal?" "Your Honor," Price said stiffly. "Court is adjourned." The gavel banged. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 20 minutes. My hands were trembling on the table. "We did it," Nadia whispered, organizing her files. "We got the pause, and he is angry. That is good for us." I looked back at the gallery. My parents were already standing up. They didn't look sad anymore. They looked furious. I walked out of the courtroom, my legs feeling like jelly. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a cold, shaky exhaustion. We were in the hallway, a long corridor lined with benches and echoing with footsteps. Nadia had stopped to talk to the clerk. I was alone for a second near the water fountain. "Skylar." The voice was soft, but it made every muscle in my back seize. I turned. My mother was standing there. She wasn't crying now. Her eyes were dry and hard, like blue marbles. "You think you are so smart," she said. Her voice was a low hiss, meant only for me, dragging family business into a public record. "You dragged me here." I said, "I just showed up. Gordon is devastated." She said, "You are humiliating him. He is humiliating himself." "Mom." He lied. She stepped closer. The smell of her perfume lavender and powder filled my nose. It used to be a comforting scent. Now it smelled like suffocation. "Listen to me," she whispered. "You think this judge can save you? This is a small town. People talk. What is that supposed to mean, your employer?" she said. "Northbridge Clinical. They value discretion, don't they? They deal with sensitive medical data." I stared at her. My heart stopped. I wonder what they would think if they knew their lead consultant was unstable. She continued, "If they knew she was involved in a messy legal battle involving fraud accusations, if they heard she was having a breakdown after her divorce." "Are you threatening my job?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I am just saying that reputation matters. Skylar, if you persist with this, if you force Gordon to testify, things will get ugly, and mud spatters. You might win the house for a few more months, but you will lose everything else." She reached out and patted my arm. It was a grotesque mimicry of affection. "Just sign the agreement, honey. Come home. We can make all this go away." I pulled my arm back as if she had burned me. "Don't touch me," I said. She smiled a sad, pitying smile for the benefit of a passing attorney and walked away to join my father and Kellen Price near the elevators. I stood frozen against the wall. The threat landed deep in my gut. My job was the only thing I had left. It was my source of income. Yes, but it was more than that. It was the place where I was competent, where I was respected, where I wasn't Mark's ex-wife or Gordon's disappointment. If they took that from me, I would have nothing. "Ms. Edwards." I jumped. Deputy Evan Rourke was standing a few feet away. He was leaning against a pillar, his thumbs hooked in his belt. He looked like he had been there for a while. "Deputy," I said, I didn't see you. I was providing security for the courtroom." He said, "I came out to check the hall." He looked in the direction my mother had gone. I couldn't hear the words. He said quietly, "But I saw the body language, and I saw your face. She just wants me to move home." I said, I didn't want to tell him. It felt like tattling. It felt weak. Evan stepped closer. He lowered his voice. Intimidation of a witness or a party to a civil suit is a crime. Skylar, if she threatened you physically, financially, professionally, you need to write it down, right now, while it is fresh. She threatened my job. I whispered, she said they would tell my employer I was unstable. Evan's expression darkened. That is coercion. He said, look, Skylar, this isn't just a property dispute anymore. You need to protect yourself. Document everything, time, date, exact words. If they try to contact your employer, that record will be the only thing that saves you. I nodded, swallowing hard. Thank you, Evan. He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a card. This is my direct line at the station. If they show up at your house again, don't open the door. Call me. I took the card. It felt heavier than a piece of paper should. I went straight from the courthouse to a coffee shop. I couldn't go home yet. The house felt tainted, and I needed to be somewhere with people and noise. I opened my laptop and logged into the Ashgrove Property Services website. I wanted to see if the processing fee was listed anywhere in the tenant portal. I didn't find the fee, but I found something else, out of curiosity. I clicked on the Available Rentals tab. I typed in my zip code. There, third on the list, was a picture of my house. It was an old photo, one taken before I had planted the hydrangeas. The listing was bold, charming two-bed bungalow in quiet neighborhood. Available November 1st. November 1st. That was 4 days away. I looked at the price. $3,200 a month. I was paying $2,400. They had listed it. They had listed it before the eviction was even granted. They were so confident, so arrogant, that they had already marketed my home to strangers, and the price, an $800 increase. Darren Vale's words echoed in my head. Clean, income-producing assets. If they could show a lender a lease agreement for $3,200. The property value used for the collateral calculation would jump significantly. They didn't just need me out. They need the higher rent on the books to secure the loan. I took a screenshot of the listing, another piece of evidence, another brick in the wall of their malice. But I needed to find the loan. If I could prove the trust was leveraged, or about to be, it would prove the motive wasn't family care, but financial desperation. I closed my laptop and drove to the Renford County Recorder's office. I had been there before for the deed, but this time I was looking for debt. The same clerk was there. She looked at me with a flicker of recognition. Back again, she asked. I need to check the index for the Halston Ridge Family Trust. I said, I am looking for any liens or encumbrances filed in the last 30 days. She typed it in. Nothing in the last 30 days, she said. My heart sank. Had Darren been wrong? Wait, she said. Here is something. It was filed 2 days ago. It is in the pending queue, so it hasn't been fully indexed yet. She printed a document. Notice of intent to lien / pre-filing notice. Claimant Pinnacle Harbor Lending. Debtor Halston Ridge Family Trust. Amount $450,000. I stared at the number. $450,000. That was more than the house was worth. Why would there be a lien, I asked. The clerk scanned the document. It looks like a collateralization hold, she said. Basically, the lender is reserving their spot in line. It says here, pursuant to bridge loan agreement dated October 1st. October 1st, they had already signed the loan agreement. They had borrowed the money, or at least, they had signed the papers promising to secure the money weeks ago, and the condition of the loan. I scanned the fine print. Collateral property must be free of encumbrances and adverse possession claims by November 5th. November 5th. That was the deadline. If the house wasn't empty by November 5th, the deal would fall through. That was why they were frantic. That was why they forged the service. That was why they threatened my job. They were on a countdown, and I was the glitch in the system. I felt a strange mix of vindication and terror. I was right. It was all about money. But knowing that made them more dangerous. People who owe $500,000 don't back down nicely. I needed Darren. I needed him to put the context behind these numbers. I called him from the parking lot. Darren, it is Skylar. I found the lien. Pinnacle Harbor. $450,000. There was a long silence on the other end. He really did it, Darren breathed. He leveraged the whole thing. Darren, the deadline is November 5th. I said, they have to have me out by then or they lose the funding. That sounds right. Darren said, the payroll account is empty. Skylar, he needs that infusion to make the quarterly tax payment on the 15th. If he misses that, the IRS gets involved. I need you to say this on paper. Darren, I need an affidavit. I can't go to court. Skylar, I can't face him. You don't have to go to court yet. I said, just a sworn statement. Nadia can draft it. We will have a notary meet you at a diner or something. You don't have to come to the office. He sighed. He sounded old and tired. He was talking about routing funds. Darren said, he asked me how to set up a restricted account that would look like a tenant security deposit, but could be swept into the operating capital. I told him that was illegal. He told me to just do the math. That is commingling funds. I said, that is embezzlement. It is compliance theater. Darren said, he is moving money around to fool the lender. Will you sign? I asked. Please. Fine, he whispered. Write it up. I drove home in the dark. The streetlights blurred in the mist. I pulled into my driveway and sat there for a long time. The house was dark. It looked small and vulnerable. I thought about my mother's threat. Northbridge Clinical. I loved my job. I was a clinical consultant. I helped hospitals optimize their patient intake workflows. It was boring to some, but to me, it was a puzzle I could solve. It was a place where logic prevailed. If you followed the process, you got the result. My parents were trying to burn that down. They were willing to destroy my career to save their own. A voice in my head. The voice of the scared daughter I used to be whispered, just give up, move home, sign the paper. You can save your job. You can sleep at night. You can stop fighting. It would be so easy. Pack a bag. Drive to the big house on the hill. Sleep in the guest suite with the high thread count sheets. Let my father handle the money. Let my mother cook the meals. It was a seductive kind of death, the death of autonomy, the death of the woman I had fought so hard to become after Mark left, if I went back. Skylar Edwards ceased to exist. I would just be Gordon and Marilyn's daughter again. I looked at the front door. The blue paint was peeling slightly at the corner. No, I got out of the car. I walked to the door. There was something taped to it, a manila envelope. I pulled it down. There was no stamp. It had been hand-delivered. I unlocked the door and went inside. Flipping on the hall light, I tore the envelope open. It was a document. Settlement agreement and release of claims. It was drafted by Kellen Price. I read the terms. The Halston Ridge Family Trust agrees to withdraw the eviction action with prejudice. Skylar Edwards agrees to vacate the premises by November 4th. Skylar Edwards agrees to sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding all family financial matters. And then, the kicker. Skylar Edwards agrees to resign her position at Northbridge Clinical Consulting effective immediately, to pursue a period of convalescence and family-assisted recovery. I stared at the words. They wanted me to quit. They wanted me to enforce their narrative myself. If I resigned to recover, it proved I was unstable. It validated everything they had said. It destroyed my credibility forever. They were offering me peace, but the price was my entire identity. I dropped the paper on the table. It slid across the wood and hit the vase of dried hydrangeas. They weren't stopping. They were escalating. I felt a cold, hard knot tighten in my chest. It wasn't fear anymore. It was hatred. Pure, crystalline hatred. They wanted a fight. They wanted to talk about stability. I picked up my phone. I took a picture of the page demanding my resignation. I texted it to Nadia. Add this to the file. I typed, they just made it personal. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, watching the street, waiting for the sun to rise. I wasn't just defending my home anymore. I was defending my right to exist as a person separate from them, and I was going to make sure that when the truth cracked open, the whole town heard the sound. The fluorescent light of the light box hummed with a low, electric buzz in the corner of Nadia Mercer's office. It was a piece of equipment she rarely used for housing cases. usually reserved for verifying old deeds, but today it was the center of our universe. Nadia placed the certified mail receipt from the court file onto the glass. The paper was translucent, the fibers visible under the harsh white glow. On top of it, she placed the birthday card I had provided, a Hallmark card with a picture of a sailboat I had given my mother 3 years ago. She adjusted the alignment, sliding the card until the signature line overlapped with the receipt. "Look at this," Nadia said, her voice quiet and clinical. I leaned in. The handwriting on the receipt was supposed to be mine. It read, "Skylar Edwards" in a looping, fluid cursive. Underneath it, the signature on the card read, "Love, Skylar." The S was the key. My mother had a very specific way of writing a capital S. She started from the bottom, looped up high, and brought the tail down in a sharp, sweeping curve that almost underlined the next letter. I had never written my S like that. My handwriting was jagged, hurried, a product of taking notes in medical consultations. The two S shapes on the lightbox were identical. They were not just similar. They were a perfect geometric match. "It is a trace," Nadia said. She lifted the card. "Someone took a sample of your signature, or in this case, a sample of what they thought was your legal signature, and traced it onto the certified mail receipt. But they made a mistake. They used a casual signature from a greeting card, not your legal signature from a lease or a check." She turned off the lightbox. The room plunged back into the gray afternoon gloom. "They forged it," I said. "My mother forged it." "It appears so," Nadia said, "and she did it 3 times. The variations are too slight. Human beings have natural variance when they sign their names. These 3 receipts, they are carbon copies of the same trace. This was not just a lie. This was a crime. We need to formalize this," Nadia said. "We are going to the Postal Inspection Service." The office of the Renford County Postal Inspection Liaison was not in the main post office, but in a federal annex building downtown that smelled of floor wax and bureaucracy. The liaison, a man named Officer Hannon, listened to us with a face that gave away nothing. I sat in the hard chair, my hands clasped in my lap. Nadia did the talking. She laid out the timeline, the missing mail, the hold requests that were toggled on and off, the forwarding order to Boxwood, and finally, the thumb drive containing Tessa's security footage. Officer Hannon took the drive. He plugged it into his computer and watched the video of my father opening my mailbox. He watched it 3 times. He stopped the video on the frame where Gordon's hand was inside the metal box. "You say this is your father?" Hannon asked. "Yes," I said. "Gordon Edwards. And you did not give him a key?" "No. He has a key to my parents' house, where I left a spare set years ago." "I never authorized him to use it." Hannon leaned back. He looked at the certified mail receipts Nadia had slid across the desk. "Civil disputes are usually not our jurisdiction," he said slowly. "We try to stay out of family squabbles, but the mail is federal property until it is in the hands of the addressee. Interfering with delivery is a felony. Filing false proof of service via certified mail is mail fraud." He tapped the desk. "I will open a file. I can't promise an arrest before your hearing on Friday. These investigations take time, but I will issue a formal letter acknowledging that an investigation is active regarding the mail delivery at 412 Elm Street. That is all we need right now." Nadia said, "Thank you." As we walked out, I felt a strange sense of vertigo. I had just reported my father to federal agents. I had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, but as I touched the cold metal of the elevator button, I realized I hadn't crossed it. He had, by Wednesday morning. The pressure was starting to show on the other side. I was at work, trying to focus on a spreadsheet for the clinic. When my phone buzzed, it was an email from Nadia. Subject: settlement offer. Urgent. I opened it. The attachment was on Ashgrove Property Services letterhead. Dear Ms. Mercer, in the interest of resolving this matter without further litigation, Ashgrove Property Services, on behalf of the trust, proposes the following: 1. Tenant agrees to vacate by November 30th, an extension of 25 days. 2. Tenant agrees to pay a balance of $3,500 to cover all outstanding administrative fees. 3. Tenant agrees to sign a mutual release of liability. This offer expires in 24 hours. I called Nadia immediately. They are blinking. Nadia said. Her voice was sharp with satisfaction. Why, I asked. Why offer an extension now? Because they know we have the logs, Nadia said. They know the service affidavit is dead in the water. Ashgrove is trying to cut their losses. They want a release of liability because they are terrified of a countersuit for fraud. I am not signing that. I said, I don't owe them $3,500. They owe me an apology. Meet me at their office in an hour. Nadia said, We are going to decline in person. Raina Holt's office was smaller than I remembered. Or maybe it was just that Raina herself seemed to have shrunk. She sat behind her desk, her posture rigid, her eyes darting between me and Nadia. We received your offer, Nadia said, placing the letter on the desk. We are rejecting it. Raina swallowed. Ms. Mercer, it is a generous offer. The trustees are willing to give her more time. The trustees are willing to do whatever keeps them out of jail, Nadia said calmly. And so are you. I imagine. Raina bristled. I resent that implication. You filed a false affidavit, Nadia said. She dropped the affidavit from Deputy Rourke onto the desk. It landed with a heavy slap. This is from the sheriff's department. The deputy who signed your proof of service was across town booking a prisoner at the exact moment he supposedly served Miss Edwards. Raina stared at the document. Her face went pale, the makeup standing out like chalk on her skin. I didn't know, she stammered. The process server handles that. You signed the verification, Nadia said. You swore under penalty of perjury that the file was accurate, and you manipulated the ledger to add fees that were never authorized, creating a false pretext for eviction. Raina looked at me. Her eyes were wet. I was just doing what I was told, she whispered. Told by whom, I asked. By my father. Raina shook her head. No, by Mr. Price. Kellen Price, Nadia asked. Raina nodded, her voice trembling. He called me personally. He sent over the templates. He said the family was handling the service internally to save embarrassment, but that I needed to generate the paperwork to match the court filing requirements. He said, Just follow the template. Raina, the trust will handle the rest. She put her head in her hands. I didn't know they forged it. I thought they just served you themselves. But you still listed me as volatile, I said. You still lied about the risk assessment. He told me to. Raina cried. He said you were unstable. He said if I didn't lock down the file, the trust would pull their entire portfolio from Ashgrove. That is 20 properties. Skylar, I couldn't lose that account. I looked at her, a woman willing to destroy my life to save her commission check. You are going to testify to that. Nadia said, on Friday. I can't, Raina whispered. Kellen will destroy me. If you don't, Nadia said, leaning in, you will be the one facing the fraud charge alone, because Price will claim he never gave those instructions, unless you speak up. Raina looked at the desk, tears dripping onto the blotter. Okay, she said. Okay. We left the office into the bright, biting wind of late October. Identity, I said aloud, what Nadia asked. Unlocking her car, I was thinking about how they got the signature and the passport number for the trust transfer documents, and my social security number for the credit check they ran without my permission. They are your parents, Nadia said. They probably have that stuff in a file somewhere. No, I said, I took all my documents when I moved out, or I thought I did. Then I remembered, the blue folder, during the divorce. When my brain was a fog of grief and logistics, I had stayed at their house for 3 weeks. I had a plastic accordion folder with everything in it: my birth certificate, my passport, my lease copies, my tax returns. I had been terrified of losing things in the move, so I kept it all together. When I finally moved into the rental, I brought the folder with me, or did I? I remembered sitting in their living room, sorting through papers. I remembered my mother saying, "Leave the heavy stuff here. Honey, you don't want to clutter up that little rental. We will keep it safe in the safe." I had left the archive, the deep history of my financial life. They didn't just steal my mail. They mined my history. They used the documents I entrusted to them to build the weapon they were using against me. I need to see them. I said, Skylar? Nadia warned. No contact. I need to look them in the eye. Nadia. I need to ask them why. Not through a lawyer. Not through a letter. I need to hear them say it. They agreed to meet me at Cedar Finch, a neutral cafe halfway between my house and theirs. It was a place with high-backed booths and quiet jazz, the kind of place where people had affairs or fired employees. I arrived first. I sat in the back corner, watching the door. They walked in 5 minutes late. My father looked tired, his shoulders slumped in his heavy coat. My mother looked fragile, her eyes darting around the room as if checking for spies. They slid into the booth opposite me. No one ordered coffee. Why, I asked. I didn't say hello. I didn't ask how they were. I just put the question on the table like a knife. Skylar. My mother started. Reaching for my hand, I pulled it back. Don't, I said. Just answer the question. You forged my signature. You stole my mail. You tried to get me fired. Why? Gordon sighed. He placed his hands on the table. They were calloused hands. The hands of a man who had built a business from nothing. Because you wouldn't listen, he said. I stared at him. That is it. Because I wouldn't listen. We told you to move home, he said, his voice steady and cold. We told you that living alone was a mistake. We told you that you weren't ready to handle everything by yourself after Mark left. But you insisted. You had to prove a point. I am 33. Dad, I am not a child. You are acting like one, he snapped, then lowered his voice as people turned to look. You are drifting. Skylar, you are renting a house you can barely afford. You are working a job that consumes you. You are single. You are aimless. And that gives you the right to commit fraud, I asked. It wasn't fraud, he said. It was a strategy. We needed to force a correction. A correction, I repeated, like I am a stock market crash. Marilyn leaned forward. Her eyes were pleading, but the logic behind them was twisted and terrifying. It is embarrassing. Skylar, she whispered. People ask us. They ask why you are living in that little house. They ask if you are okay. It makes us look like we don't care about you. Like we abandoned you. So you evicted me to save your reputation, I asked. We evicted you to save you, she hissed. If you lost the house, you would have to come home. If you came home, we could help you. We could manage your money. We could help you find a nice man. We could fix what Mark broke. I felt a cold horror wash over me. They truly believed it, in their minds. The forgery and the lies were just tools of tough love. They saw themselves as the heroes of this story, rescuing the wayward daughter from her own independence. And the money, I asked. The loan from Pinnacle Harbor. The $450,000, was that for me too? Gordon flinched. His eyes narrowed. That is business. He said, you used me as collateral. I said, you needed the house empty to get the loan. You didn't just want me home. You needed to liquidate my life to save your warehouse. Gordon's face turned red. I built that company for this family, he said. Everything I have is for you. If I have to move assets around to save it, I will. You should be grateful I have a trust to put you in. I stood up. I looked down at them, two people I had spent my whole life trying to please. I am not an asset. Dad, I am your daughter, or I was. I am not moving home. I said, I am going to court, and I'm going to tell the judge everything. Gordon looked at me with a sneer I had never seen before. Go ahead, he said. See who they believe. The respected business owner and his wife, or the unstable divorcee who sues her own parents. I walked out of the cafe. I didn't look back. I knew that if I did, I might turn into a pillar of salt. Thursday was a blur of war preparations. Nadia and I turned her conference room into a command center. We taped a long sheet of butcher paper to the wall and started drawing the timeline. May 1st, trust created. May 15th, house transferred to trust. July 1st. Processing fee added to rent unilateral change. October 1st. Gordon signs bridge loan agreement with Pinnacle Harbor. October 10th. The fake service date, Deputy Miller is at the jail. October 15th. The default judgment. October 27th. The eviction attempt. We overlaid the evidence, the bank statements showing full payment, the video of the mail theft, the letter from the postal inspector, the affidavit from Deputy Rourke. It was a damning mosaic. It showed a calculated step-by-step conspiracy to strip me of my rights. Late that afternoon, a courier arrived with a thick envelope. It was Darren Vale's affidavit. I read it with trembling hands. Darren Vale, depose and state that Gordon Edwards informed me of his intent to clear the books regarding the property at 412 Elm, that he explicitly stated the need to show aggressive management to satisfy the underwriting criteria of Pinnacle Harbor lending. It was the smoking gun regarding the motive. Then, Deputy Rourke's official departmental affidavit arrived. It was dry, factual, and devastating. Review of shift assignment logs indicates Deputy James Miller was assigned to Intake Processing Station B from 1400 to 2200 hours on October 10th. Electronic keycard records confirm Deputy Miller did not exit the secure facility during this window. We had them. We had the motive. We had the method. We had the proof. Go home. Skylar, Nadia said at 6 o'clock, get some sleep. Tomorrow, we end this. I drove home. Feeling a strange calm, the fear was gone, replaced by a steely resolve. I was going to win. Not just for the house, but for my sanity. I parked the car and walked up the driveway. The wind was howling, rattling the dry leaves in the yard. I reached for the doorknob, and then I saw it. Another manila envelope was taped to the door. My stomach turned over. Not again. I ripped it down and carried it inside. I threw it on the kitchen table and stared at it for a long moment before opening it. It was thick, heavier than the last one. I opened the clasp. Inside was a document titled Final Family Settlement and Non-Disclosure Agreement. There was a sticky note attached to the front in my mother's handwriting. Please, Skylar, don't make us do this. Just sign it. We love you. I read the terms. They were even worse than before. 1. Immediate vacancy of the property. 2. Resignation from Northbridge Clinical Consulting. 3. Skylar Edwards shall agree to a voluntary competency evaluation by a physician selected by the trust. 4. Skylar Edwards shall grant power of attorney to Gordon Edwards for a period of 24 months. And then, the threat. If this agreement is not signed by 8 o'clock a.m. on the date of the hearing. The trust reserves the right to introduce into the public record certain medical and personal history regarding the defendant's divorce proceedings and prior therapy sessions. I felt the blood drain from my face. They were going to weaponize my therapy. I had seen a counselor for 6 months after Mark left. I had talked about my anxiety, my grief, my fear of being alone. I had trusted that process. My parents knew I had gone. They had paid for the first few sessions when I was between insurance plans. They had the bills. Maybe they had notes. No. The therapist wouldn't give them notes, but they could subpoena the fact that I went. They could paint me as mentally unfit in open court. Competency evaluation, power of attorney. They didn't just want to win the eviction. They wanted to erase me. They wanted to declare me incompetent so they could legally take control of everything: my money, my decisions, my life. I looked at the clock. It was 10 o'clock at night. I paced the floor. The walls felt like they were closing in. They were betting that I was too ashamed to let my secrets be aired in public. They were betting that I would fold to protect my privacy. I looked at the family agreement. I grabbed a pen. I didn't sign it. I wrote across the front page in thick, black ink. See you in court. I left the envelope on the table. I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, listening to the wind, waiting for the sun to rise on the day that would decide if I was a person or just a problem to be solved. The air in courtroom 4B was stale, recycled, and heavy with the scent of floor wax. I sat at the defendant's table, my hands clasped so tightly that my knuckles had turned the color of old bone. Beside me, Nadia Mercer was arranging her exhibits with the precision of a surgeon laying out instruments. On the other side of the aisle, my parents sat behind Kellen Price. They were not looking at me. My mother was staring at the great seal of the state mounted on the wall behind the judge's bench, her expression one of tragic forbearance. My father was reading something on his phone, his thumb scrolling aggressively, his jaw set in a hard line. Judge Anthony Vance swept into the room, his black robe billowing. "All rise," the bailiff intoned. We stood. We sat. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. "Case number CV 4092, the clerk announced. Halston Ridge Family Trust versus Schuyler Edwards. Continued hearing on motion to stay and motion to dismiss." Kellen Price stood up. He buttoned his jacket, a smooth, practiced motion. He didn't look like a man who had been caught in a lie. He looked like a man who was about to explain why the lie was actually a higher form of truth. "Your Honor," he began, his voice baritone and reasonable. "Before we get bogged down in technicalities, I think it is important to center the court on the reality of this situation. This is not a standard landlord-tenant dispute. This is a family matter. The defendant is the daughter of the trustees." He gestured to my parents. "The trustees initiated this action because communication had broken down. Yes, there may have been procedural imperfections in the service of process. We concede that the third-party vendor may have been sloppy, but the defendant knew about the dispute. She knew her parents wanted her to move home. To dismiss this case on a technicality regarding a timestamp would be to ignore the substantive issue the owners of the property require possession, and the occupant has refused to engage in a dialogue." I felt a flash of heat up my neck. Procedural imperfections. That was what he called a felony forgery. Judge Vance leaned forward, peering over his reading glasses. "Mr. Price," he said. His voice was deceptively mild. "You call a falsified affidavit of personal service a procedural imperfection. Your Honor, my client relied on the process server. The law relies on the process server." The judge interrupted. "Due process is not a technicality. It is the foundation of this court's authority. If the defendant was not served, she was not under the court's jurisdiction when you asked me for a default judgment. You cannot bypass the Constitution just because the plaintiff gave birth to the defendant." Price stiffened slightly. "We argue that she had actual notice." "Your Honor, she is here today. She is here because she investigated her own eviction." The judge snapped. "Not because you invited her." He turned to Nadia. "Ms. Mercer, you may proceed." Nadia stood up. She walked to the podium, holding a single binder. "Your Honor, this is not a case of sloppy paperwork. This is a case of constructive fraud. We will show that the plaintiffs engineered a false narrative of non-payment, manufactured a default judgment through forged service, and are attempting to use this court to facilitate a financial transaction involving the property." She opened the binder. First, the issue of payment. She put the transparency on the overhead projector. It was a side-by-side comparison. On the left, my bank statements showing transfers of $2,400 every month. On the right, the Ashgrove ledger showing unpaid balances. "The plaintiff claims Ms. Edwards owes late fees," Nadia said. "But notice the dates. The processing fee of $72 appears for the first time in July. There is no addendum to the lease signed by the tenant authorizing this fee. It was added unilaterally." Nadia turned to the witness stand. "I call Schuyler Edwards." I stood up. My legs felt wooden. I walked to the stand, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. I sat down. I looked at Nadia. I did not look at my parents. "Ms. Edwards," Nadia asked, "did you ever receive notice that your rent had increased, or that a fee was being applied?" "No." I said. My voice was steady, lower than usual. "I have been on auto pay for 3 years. I never received an email, a letter, or a call about a fee. Did you receive the 3 certified letters the plaintiff claims were sent in August and September? No. Did you receive the summons on October 10th? No. I was at work." Nadia paused. "Ms. Edwards, why are you fighting this eviction? Why not just move?" I took a breath. This was the moment. I could have screamed. I could have cried about the betrayal, but I remembered what Evan Rourke had told me. Keep it factual, because I have a valid lease. I said, and because the allegations in the complaint that I am volatile, that I am a squatter, that I am destroying the property are false, if I accept this eviction, I accept that record. I work in a field that requires background checks. I cannot have a fraudulent eviction on my credit report. Simple, calm, reasonable. I saw the judge looking at me. He was measuring me against the description in the file, the unstable woman my mother had invented. I sat with my hands folded, my back straight. I was the picture of sanity. Nadia nodded. Nothing further. Price stood up to cross-examine. Ms. Edwards, he said, smiling kindly, you admit your parents have asked you to move home multiple times in the last 6 months. They have suggested it. Yes. And you refused. I declined. I have a home. And you are aware that the trust needs to liquidate assets. I am aware now. I said, I wasn't told that. I was told I was unstable. Price paused. Isn't it true that you have been under significant stress since your divorce? That you have sought therapy? Objection. Nadia shot up. Relevance. It goes to the witness's credibility and her perception of events. Price argued. Sustained, the judge said. We are not litigating the defendant's mental health. We are litigating a writ of possession. Move on. Price frowned. He had lost his wedge. No further questions. I stepped down. Nadia called her next witness. Or rather, she entered her next exhibit. Your Honor, regarding the service on October 10th. She handed the bailiff a document. This is a sworn affidavit from the Renford County Sheriff's Department, signed by the duty commander. It includes the shift logs and electronic keycard data for Deputy James Miller, the individual who signed the proof of service. The judge took the document. He read it in silence. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the vending machine in the hallway outside. The affidavit states, the judge read aloud, his voice flat, that Deputy Miller was logged into the secure intake facility from 2 o'clock in the afternoon until 10 o'clock at night. He is captured on video at 5:30. The alleged time of service, processing a detainee. The judge lowered the paper. He looked at Kellen Price. The look was withering. Mr. Price, your process server claims he handed papers to the defendant at her home. The sheriff's department says he was in jail. Unless Deputy Miller has mastered by location, this affidavit of service is a perjury. Price stood up. He looked pale. Your Honor, as I stated, I was unaware. You are the officer of the court, the judge barked, slamming his hand on the bench. You filed this? You verified it. You asked me to strip a woman of her home based on a lie. The judge took a deep breath. Continue. Ms. Mercer, Nadia wasn't done, Your Honor. We would like to address the late fees that triggered the default. We subpoenaed the metadata from Ashgrove Property Services accounting software. She held up a packet. The $72 fee was not generated by the system's automated lease protocol. It was entered manually. The user log shows the entry was made by an administrator account. She flipped the page. The administrator account is linked to the email address admin@halstonridgedev.com. Halston Ridge Development. Nadia said, not Ashgrove. The fee was added by an external user with admin privileges tied to the trust's development partner. The judge looked at the exhibit. So the landlord went into the management system, added a fee the tenant didn't know about, and then used the non-payment of that hidden fee to file for eviction. Exactly. Your Honor? Nadia turned to the back of the courtroom. I call Raina Holt. Raina stood up. She looked like she was walking to the gallows. She took the stand, her voice barely a whisper as she swore the oath. Ms. Holt, Nadia asked. You are the office manager for Ashgrove Property Services. Yes. Did you swear to the verification that Ms. Edwards was a volatile tenant who required expedited eviction? Raina looked at Kellen Price. Price was staring at his pen, refusing to meet her eyes. Yes, Raina whispered. Was that statement true? Had Ms. Edwards ever threatened you? No. Then why did you sign it? Raina started to cry. A tear tracked through her heavy foundation. I was told to. She said, Mr. Price sent over the draft. He told me the trust insisted on it. And did you receive any other materials from the trust? Raina nodded. She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. Mrs. Edwards brought this to my office, she said. She dropped it off 3 months ago. She told me it was the tenant history and that I should use it to build the file. Nadia took the envelope and handed it to the judge. The judge opened it. He pulled out copies of my divorce decree, copies of my old therapy bills, and a handwritten note on Marilyn's stationery that read, "Tenant is emotionally fragile. Do not engage directly. All notices should be routed to secondary address. The secondary address listed was my parents' P.O. box." The courtroom erupted in a low murmur. The judge stared at the note. He looked at my mother. Marilyn shrank back in her seat, her hand covering her mouth. "So," the judge said, his voice icy, "the plaintiff instructed the management company to route the eviction notices to the plaintiff's own P.O. box, ensuring the defendant would never see them, and then they instructed the manager to label the defendant volatile to prevent direct contact." Raina sobbed. "I didn't know about the service. I couldn't lose the account." "Step down," the judge ordered. Raina fled the stand. Judge Vance closed the file. He didn't ask for closing arguments. He didn't need them. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. When he looked up, his face was hard. "I have heard enough." He looked at Kellen Price. "Mr. Price, your conduct in this matter is appalled. You have presented a fraudulent return of service. You have suborned perjury from the property manager. You have filed a complaint based on a manufactured debt. I am dismissing the eviction action with prejudice," the judge announced. "That means you cannot refile it. The judgment of default is vacated. The writ of possession is quashed." He turned to the clerk. "I am also referring the record of this hearing, specifically the affidavit of Deputy Miller and the testimony regarding the mail routing, to the District Attorney's Office for investigation into fraud and abuse of process." My father stood up. "Your Honor," he shouted, "this is my property. Sit down," the judge roared. Gordon froze. He sat down slowly. "You are lucky I am not holding you in contempt right now." "Mr. Edwards," the judge said. He turned to me. "Ms. Edwards, the eviction is dead. You do not have to move. However," he paused, "I cannot strip the trust of its ownership. They still own the house. This dismissal protects you from this specific eviction, but it does not change the deed. You are still their tenant." "I understand, Your Honor." I said, "The court is adjourned." The gavel banged. It was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. Nadia turned to me and smiled a real, wide grin. "We got them," she whispered. "Dismissed with prejudice. They can't touch you." I looked back at the gallery. My parents were arguing with Kellen Price. My father was red-faced, gesturing wildly. My mother was sitting perfectly still, staring at me with eyes that were black holes of resentment. I stood up. I felt light. The weight that had been crushing me for 2 weeks was gone. "Let us get out of here," I said. We walked out of the courthouse and into the late afternoon sun. The wind had died down. The world looked sharper, clearer. I was saying goodbye to Nadia near her car when a shadow fell over us. Gordon Edwards stood there. He had left his lawyer inside. He was alone, and he was seething. "You think you won," he said. His voice was quiet, a low rumble like distant thunder. "I did win, Dad. The judge said so." Gordon shook his head. He looked at the courthouse, then back at me. "That was just a skirmish. Skylar, you embarrassed me. You humiliated your mother. You exposed the family business to an investigation. You did that." I said, "I just told the truth." He stepped closer. I didn't flinch. "The trust still owns the house," he said, "and the loan. The loan is going to fall through now because of you. That is $500,000 of liquidity gone. Do you know what that does to me? I know you shouldn't have bet my home to save your warehouse." I said, "You just made enemies you can't see." "Skylar," he said, "Pinnacle Harbor isn't a family bank. They don't care about court orders. They care about their money. You are just a squatter to them now." "Is that a threat?" I asked. "It is a fact," he said. Gordon Marilyn came running up, her heels clicking on the asphalt. She grabbed his arm. "Stop it," she hissed. She looked at me. Her face was streaked with tears. But they weren't the manipulative tears from before. These were tears of genuine despair. "You are breaking the family." "Skylar," she sobbed. "Over a rental house. Is it worth it? We are your parents." I looked at them. The man who threatened me. The woman who forged my name. "You broke the family in May." I said, "When you decided I was an asset instead of a person, I turned my back on them. I am going home." I said, "My home." I walked away. I heard Marilyn calling my name. But I didn't stop. I reached my car. Deputy Evan Rourke was leaning against the cruiser parked next to it. He was off duty, wearing a windbreaker. But he still looked like the law. He pushed off the car as I approached. "I heard the ruling," he said. "Dismissed with prejudice." I nodded. "Thanks to your affidavit." He shrugged. "Just facts, Miss Edwards." He looked toward the parking lot exit where my parents' luxury SUV was peeling away. "I heard what he said to you just now," Evan said, "about the enemies you can't see. I think he's just angry." I said, "Maybe," Evan said. "But listen, if you see cars you don't know, if you see people loitering, call me, not the station, call my cell." He looked at me seriously. "You did the right thing, Skylar. You kept it factual. You didn't let them gaslight you. That takes guts." "Thank you." "Evan." I got into my car. Nadia tapped on the window. She leaned in. "Okay. Victory lap is over," she said. "Now the hard part." "What is the hard part?" "We have to file a civil claim," she said, "for the mail fraud, the harassment, the emotional distress, and we need to report the trust to the state attorney general." "Do we have to?" I asked. "Can't I just live my life? They still own the house, Skylar. They will try again. Maybe not next month, but in 6 months, they will find a loophole. The only way to stop them for good is to hit them so hard financially that they are forced to sell the property to you or a third party just to settle the lawsuit. It will be ugly," she warned. "It will be public. It will be exhausting." I looked at the courthouse. I looked at the spot where my father had stood. Enemies you can't see. I looked at Nadia. "File it," I said. That night, I sat in my living room. The boxes my parents had brought were gone. I had thrown them in the recycling bin. The house was quiet. I had my wine glasses, the ones that hadn't broken. I poured myself a drink. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. The available listing had been taken down from the Ash Grove website an hour ago. I checked. I was safe. For tonight. But as I watched the streetlights flicker on, I saw a black sedan drive slowly past my house. It slowed down, lingering for a second too long. Before speeding up and disappearing around the corner, it wasn't my father's truck. It wasn't a police car. I remembered the lien. Pinnacle Harbor Lending. My father was right. The eviction was over, but the debt remained, and debt has a way of collecting itself. I took a sip of wine. My hand was steady. Let them come. I had the logs. I had the truth. And I finally knew exactly who I was. I wasn't the fragile divorcee anymore. I was the woman who beat the house, and I was just getting started. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope Skylar's battle resonated with you. It's a terrifying thought, the people who are supposed to protect us becoming the ones we need protection from. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to stand your ground against family? Where are you listening from today? If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Revenge Stories and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter. Share your thoughts in English below. I read every single one. Stay strong, and see you in the next story.